To take Ben's title at the World Championship was Dr. Gunther Karsten, the balding, angular 43-year-old godfather of German memory sport, who had won every German national contest since 1998. Gunther showed up wearing what I learned is his standard uniform, an impossible pair of black earmuffs and metallic sunglasses, whose insides have been completely taped over except for two small pinholes. Extraneous stimuli, as Gunther calls them, are the memorizers. Didette nor a retired Danish monomist used to compete wearing hose blinders. He also wore a gold belt buckle embossed with his initials, a gold chain over his tight white t-shirt, and black sailor pants that flared at the bottom. Gunther informed me that in college he was a photo model for Nissan cars, and depending on how you squinted, he looked like a villain in a James Bond movie or an aging figure skater. He was in terrific physical shape, and I would soon learn, a fierce competitor, despite the fact that one of his legs is slightly shorter than the other, from a childhood bone disease. He regularly races in and wins track events for middle-aged men. He was carrying around with him a large shiny metal suitcase filled with between 20 and 30 decks of playing cards, which he planned to memorize. He wouldn't tell me the exact number for fear we'll get back to Ben Fridmore. The actual competition took place in a large oak paneled room in one of the Oxford-stored old buildings, with tall Gothic windows. An oversized room was arranged no differently than it had been during the school year. When I was used to administer exams to Oxford undergraduates, there were 4 dozen desks, each of which had a 6-inch tall digital stopwatch clamped to it, which could be used for the last and most exciting event of the contest, speed cards. When the competitors race to commit a single deck of playing cards to memory as fast as possible, unlike the U.S. Championship, which just had 5 events, none lasting longer than 15 minutes. The World Memory Championship is frequently referred to as a mental decathlon. Its 10 events called disciplines span 3 grueling days, and each test the competitors memorize in a slightly different way. Contestants have to memorize previously unpublished poems spanning several pages of random words, record 280 in 15 minutes. A list of binary digits, record 4,140 in 30 minutes. Shuffled decks of playing cards, a list of historical dates and names and faces. Some disciplines called speed events test how much the contestant can memorize in 15 minutes, record 405 digits. 2 marathon disciplines test how many decks of cards and random digits they can memorize in an hour, record 2,080 digits and 27 decks of cards. The first World Memory Championship was held at the Posh Athenaeum Club in London in 1991. I thought, this is insane, recalls Tony Busan. We have crossword championships, we have Scrabble championships, we have chess, bridge, poker, draughts, canasta, and Go championships. We have science fair championships, and for the biggest and most fundamental of all human cognitive process, memory, there's no championship. He also knew that the idea of a World Memory Championship would be irresistibly drawn to the media, and a savvy way to promote his book on mind training. With the help of his friend Ray Keane, a British chess grandmaster who writes the Daily Chess column from time to time from the Times London, Busan sent out letters to a handful of people who he knew were involved in memory training, and ran an ad in the Times advertising the contest. Carvello, who had memorized the telephone number of every Smith in the middle draw phone book, and about another person named Bruce Balmer, who had set a record for memorizing 2,000 foreign region words in a single day. Several of the competitors were Dukes. The contestants no longer adhere to such strict dress code, but everything else about the championship has gotten far more serious since 1991. What began as a one-day contest has now expanded to fill an entire weekend of all the disciplines in a 3-day memory decathon. The first one of the first day, the poem, is the most universally dreaded because of my own faltering efforts to memorize poetry. It was the one event that I wanted to watch closely. Every year, Gunther lobbies to have the event stricken from the contest, or at least replaced with rules that I think was objective. But poetry is where memorization begins, and to cut it from the championship because a few of the competitors find it difficult would run counter to the competition's underlying premise that memorization is a creative and humanizing endeavor. So every year, a new, previously unpublished poem is commissioned for the World Championship. For the first few years of the competition, in the early 90s, the poem was written by British poet laureate Ted Hughes, whom Tony Busan described as an old friend. Since Hugh's death in 1998, the poem has been written by Buzan himself. This year's 189 free verse offering titled Monsieur came from a collection titled Requiem of Ted. It began with most things in the universe. I am happy. Supernovas, the Horsehead Nebula, the Crab, the light years, big clouds that are the womb of the stars. It went on to list the many things Tony Buzan was happy about, including God's freezing balls, and ended. I'm not happy that Ted is dead. The competitors had 15 minutes to memorize as many lines as possible, and then half hour to write them on a blank sheet of paper. In order to receive full credit for a line, it had to be rendered perfectly down to each capital letter and punctuation mark. Competitors who failed to underscore just how not happy the author was, or who mistakenly thought that Ted was dead without a capital D, would get only half the total point of that line. The question of how to memorize a piece of text or speech has vexed monomists for millennia. The early memory treatise described two types of recollection: memoria rerum and memoria verborum. Memory for things and memory for words. When approaching a text or a speech, one could try to remember the gist, or one could try to remember verbal verbatism. The Roman rhetoric teacher Quintilian looked down on memoria verborum on the ground that creates such a vast number of images, was only inefficient since it would require a grand-tuned memory palace, but also unstable. If your memory or speech hinged on knowing every word, then not only did you have a lot of memory to remember, but if you forget a single word, you could end up trapped in a room of your memory palace, start staring at a blank wall, lost and unable to move on. Cicero agreed that the best way to memorize a speech is point by point, not by word. By employing memoria rerum in his De Rhetoric, he suggests that the orator delivering a speech should make one image of each major topic. He wants to cover the place each of those images at a locus. Indeed, the word topic comes from the Greek word topos, or place. Locus, the phrase in the first place, is a vestige of the art of memory. Perfect recall of words is something our brains simply aren't very good at. A fact famously illustrated in the Congressional Watergate hearing of 1973. In his testimony before Senate Watergate Investigating Committee, President Richard Nixon's counsel John Dean reported to a congressman on the contents of dozens of meetings related to the cover-up of the break-in to the president's chagrin, and the committee's delight. Dean was able to repeat verbatim many conversations that had taken place in the Oval Office. In his recollection, were so detailed and seemingly so precise that reporters took to him calling the human tape recorder. At the time, it hadn't yet been revealed that there had been an actual tape recording in the Oval Office recording, and the conversation that Dean had reconstructed from memory. While the rest of the country took note of the political implications of those tape recordings, the psychologist Ulrich Nisser saw them as valuable data trove. Nisser compared the transcripts of recordings with Dean's testimony and analyzed what Dean's memory got right and what it got wrong. Not only did Dean not remember specific quotes correctly, that is to say, verbatim, he often didn't even properly remember the gist of what had been discussed. Rerum, but even when his memories are wrong in isolated episodes, notes Nasir, there is a sense of which he was altogether right. The major theme of his testimony were all accurate. Nixon wanted to cover up to succeed. He was pleased when it went well. He was troubled when it began to unravel. He was perfectly willing to consider illegal activities if they would extend his power or confound his enemies. John Dean did not misrepresent, argues Nasir. He did get the details wrong, but he got the important stuff right. We all do the same thing when we try to recount conversations, because without special training, our memories tend to pay attention to the big picture. It makes sense that our brains would work like that. The brain is a costly organ. Though it accounts for only 2% of the body's mass, it uses up a fifth of all oxygen we breathe, and it's where a quarter of all our glucose gets burned. The brain is the most energetically expensive piece of equipment in our body and has been ruthlessly honed by natural selection to be efficient at tasks for which it evolved. One might say that the whole point of our nervous system, from the sensory organ that feeds information to the globe of nerves that interpresent it, is to develop a sense of what is happening in the present and what will happen in the future, so that we can respond in the best possible way. Strip away the emotions, the philosophizing, the neurons, and the dreams, and our brain is the most reductive sense and fundamentally prediction and planning machine. And to work efficiently, they have to find order in chaos of possible memories. For the vast amount of data pouring in through the senses, our brain must quickly sift out which information is likely to have some bearing on the future. Attend to that and ignore the noise. Much of the chaos that our brains filter out is words, because more often than not, the actual language that conveys an idea is just window addressing what matters in the rest. The meaning of those words and that our brains are so good at remembering in real life, it's weird that anyone is asked to recall and add verbium outside of congressional depositions and poetry event at the International Memory Competition.